Today's edition of the Three Martini Lunch is brought to you by 4Patriots. Check out their brand new website, 4patriots.com/martini. And one of the things you'll find there, the best-selling survival food kits. Look, we found out during the pandemic, you can't always rely on the supply chain. And who knows what happens if there's an emergency in your area, like a devastating hurricane or a tornado, or in some places even an earthquake. Out in Maui, we saw wildfires not that long ago. You just don't know. So the best-selling survival food kits have delicious tasting foods for breakfast, lunches, and dinners. They come with real meat and vegetables. They're designed to last for 25 years if stored properly. You can also take them on camping trips or picnics, but most of all, they're great in an emergency if the power is out. Just boil water over a fire, simmer and serve, and enjoy hot meals and stay safe in a crisis. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini.
Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. As we mentioned yesterday, Jim Garrity is off today. Scott Bertram, director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, is here in his place. He's also the host of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, general manager of WRFH, Radio Free Hillsdale, on the campus of Hillsdale College, 101.7 FM. He's also a lecturer in journalism at Hillsdale and co-host of the podcast Wasn't That Special? 50 years of Saturday Night Live, which you can learn more about and subscribe to at wasn'tthatspecial.com. Scott, welcome back as always.
Greg, a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, been a busy week, obviously, with elections and debates, but other stuff is going on in the world, too. And we talked, obviously, about the series of polling from the New York Times and Siena that had Democrats lighting their hair on fire, or in David Axelrod's case, was left of the hair, but he was the first one and the biggest voice to basically try and shove Joe Biden out of the presidential race. Doesn't look like that's happening, at least at the moment. But, you know, you look at those polls and you're like, okay, well, most of them are still pretty close. Margin of error. Nevada was 10, 11 points in favor of Trump, but Pennsylvania is tight and Georgia's tight, and he's actually still up in Wisconsin. So it doesn't take a lot to reverse that, especially if we get some convictions of Donald Trump. He's doing fine in all the other states, right? No. New poll out from California voters shows that Joe Biden is underwater for the first time in his presidency. According to this write-up from the Free Beacon, 52% of Californians disapprove of the president's job performance, while 44% approve, a reversal from earlier this year when 57% approved and just 39% disapproved. That is a massive swing. The polling done by UC Berkeley's Institute of Government Studies that says Biden's ratings have plummeted significantly within his own party, and particularly among women, Latinos, Asians, and Californians under 40. And they're most.
But he's got everybody else. That's the good news.
Else. And they're most bad about inflation and immigration, which you think, oh, deep blue state, they don't care. Well, guess what? They do care, because it's draining services, and they have a crime problem in a lot of their cities as well, particularly Los Angeles and San Francisco. And so, Scott, if you can't convince the people in California you should be the Democratic candidate in 2024, perhaps you've got more work to do than even the most cynical of us had previously thought. Doesn't mean if he is the nominee that he's going to lose California. But if the people are that unenthusiastic about you, it's not good.
Right. And approval rating is not the same thing as saying, yes, I will or won't vote for you in a real head-to-head matchup. So standard caveats apply. But it shouldn't be a surprise that in California, much like the rest of the country, there are people falling out of love with President Biden. And as 2024 quickly approaches, we are 7 scant weeks away or so, turning attention. You know, normal people out there perhaps aren't even thinking about what's happening in November of 2024. But once that calendar page turns, they will. And beginning to take a look at who the leading candidates for each party, and other opinion polls will tell us that the general public isn't really enthusiastic about either of the leading candidates at this point. And President Biden has troubles because we've talked about this before, Greg. So many of the issues that he has to deal with are not issues you can pretend don't exist. People go to the grocery store and see the increase in prices. People go to the gas pump every week and see the increase in prices. And now you throw in the fact that the world is crumbling around him during his leadership in the White House, and you find him doing things like announcing Amtrak funding earlier this week. We're going to fix the trains in the country. $16 billion. They're going to run on time. Those are the kind of celebrations that he has been reduced to at this point, because there is not a whole lot, not even Bidenomics at this point, working in his favor. And I don't think if he is the nominee, which at this point, Jay Cost, who's works for AEI at this point as a non-resident fellow, but had a thread on X earlier this week, late last week, about not pricing in the downside of replacing Biden on the ticket, which is, okay, maybe you get another candidate, but then you burst open even farther all these seams that have been holding together the various groups that make up the Democratic contingency. If you burst open the nomination again and say, all right, maybe it will be someone else, all those fissures begin to show, and you do have a more fractured voting base coming into November. So is there an upside? Maybe, but people perhaps aren't pricing in the potential downsides of trying to replace an incumbent president on the ticket at this late stage.
That's very well said, and you're right about the factions. There's some paradoxical alliances in the Democratic coalition, and I'm sure there are some on the right as well. But the most obvious one that we've seen lately is the Greens and the unions. Finally, the automakers, it looks like, got a deal done with the UAW. But with the Greens pushing, the electric vehicles and so forth, and we'll talk about the Green movement a little bit later in the podcast as well, and the unions, wanting to have jobs, one of those is going to have to give a little bit. And it's not exactly sure which way that's going to go right now. And there are plenty of other ones as well, like, feminists for Palestine or queers for Palestine. I mean, at some point, there's going to be a fissure on some of these things.
Absolutely. And it will come sooner rather than later if the rumblings or discussions about potentially, because then you have the discussion about whether or not the next in line, the current vice president, is even the person you want. And there will be plenty of factions of the party who say no, somebody else. And that chaos that could ensue is a separate issue altogether.
Oh, yeah. There will not be if he doesn't run in 2024, there will not be a coronation for Kamala Harris. There will be a late free-for-all in this thing, which could be a lot of fun for us to watch. But watching these sharp elbows, I'm sure she'd be part of it. Newsom, Pritzker wants in. A lot of people talking about Whitmer and other governors as well. Dean Phillips apparently not capturing the imagination of most Democratic voters at this point because, first of all, they have to know he exists, which is step one, and he hasn't gotten that far yet. But
people hear that name and they think he's somewhere at Harvard. Dean Phillips. Yes, so over there in the law department, right? Yeah, no.
Yes. He's frequently in touch with Dean Wormer and other important deans. Dean Martin from Back to School, for example. But some of these numbers are not good. Biden's favorability among Democrats in California, mind you, 69%, which seems lopsided, and it is, but it's nowhere near what you want it to be heading into a re-election year. 61% disapprove of his handling of inflation because they've got fuel prices at $7 a gallon now, and 60% disapprove of his immigration policies. So going hard left doesn't even please the people in California. So again, it's going to be blue most likely, but if you have to work hard to keep California, it's going to mean you can't spend as much time and money elsewhere.
Hey, y'all, this is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. What happens when we die? From Angel Studios, the force behind Sound of Freedom and The Chosen, comes an unprecedented deep dive into the phenomena of near-death experiences in the new movie, After Death. After Death makes a courageous venture into a hotly debated, mysterious subject by comparing near-death experience with cutting-edge scientific knowledge. Hear from experts in the fields of science, philosophy, and medicine medicine, as well as firsthand experiences of people who have lived through death as they paint a fascinating picture of life in the next realm. This groundbreaking project responds to the soul's innate desire to find meaning in life and solace in the future. Come see it for yourself or pay it forward by providing a free ticket for others to see the film. Leave your preconceptions at the door and prepare for a never-before-seen glimpse into what the next life could entail in After Death, opening October 27th. Get your tickets today or pay it forward at angel.com/3martini lunch. That's angel.com/3martini lunch. After Death, the end is only the beginning. Rated PG-13.
All right, on to our bad martini now. And this is one of those stories, Scott, that I saw on X on Wednesday, and you have to do a double take. And you're like, what? Did that just happen? But Noah Pollock, who writes frequently for Free Beacon, is also breaking the story over on Honest Reporting. Quote, photographers working for AP, CNN, New York Times, and Reuters were embedded with Hamas on October 7th and accompanied the terrorist group into Israel. They knew the attack was coming and participated in it. Now, in the actual story at Honest Reporting, the AP and Reuters actually employ these people. For the likes of CNN and New York Times, they're freelancers, so they hire them here and there. One of the ones that CNN has used, Hassan Aslaya, has now been let go by CNN because he took a selfie with a Hamas leader in Gaza where the Hamas leader is giving him a kiss. So clearly they're pretty tight. But now the question is, are these media organizations in some way complicit in these terrorist attacks? Do they at least have foreknowledge of, well, they clearly had foreknowledge of something. The question is, what did they have foreknowledge of? Or were these just the correspondents who follow Hamas in Gaza, and then they just went with whatever they were doing that day? So, Scott, you've been in the media a long time. How big of a issue is this, and how much scrutiny and pain should these media organizations be subject to here?
Well, coming from the same mainstream media who in the New York Times employs the guy who loves Hitler, and it's not a real big deal. Just, we talked to him for 20 minutes. He seems good. So, does a good job. Gets us good information. There's someone, and I do not know where it's sourced from. It's kind of, I think, taken off from various places. But it's every time something like this happens, posts, no matter how much you think you hate the mainstream media, you should hate them more. This is one of those data points about it, because we don't have answers to a couple of really important questions about what happened here. Did the journalists know about the Hamas attack in advance? It would be good to get a clear answer. Based on the circumstantial evidence we have, it seems likely yes. How does this harm the credibility of news sites, whatever is left of CNN, the New York Times, AP, that they are using stringers, freelancers like this? And who else might have known in advance about the attack if the photographers did as well? There's a quote in one of these stories. The Associated Press had no knowledge of the October 7th attacks before they happened. I think we have to parse exactly what those words say and what those words mean. If you end up getting pictures of this happening, isn't it natural, Greg, to ask questions like, how did you get this information? Or how did you get these pictures? And why weren't they attacking you? And right, I mean, there are just certain very obvious questions that pop up before you agree to pay someone for perhaps these freelance pictures. Or in the AP's case, as you said, it's more of an employee situation. But those are questions that should have been asked. And the Associated Press had no knowledge of the October 7th attacks. Okay, were they tipped off that, hey, something's going to happen over here? Would you like me to get some pictures of it? Like, was there some sort of not direct and explicit? Was there not an explicit description of what was going to happen? But something's going to happen. How much did they know before the actual events took place? And there's a picture making the rounds just as we went to air here, of one of those photographers holding a grenade as he joins those Hamas terrorists in the attacks at October 7th. So when you read the headline, and the headline was something like, taking part in the attacks, it was not hyperbole. There's some evidence that they actually were taking part in the attacks, then sending photos of the attacks to CNN, the New York Times, AP, Reuters, etc. This should be a very big deal.
We'll see if there's, more tough questions for the AP and Reuters and even CNN and the New York Times. CNN, as I mentioned earlier, has cut ties with the one freelancer that is mentioned here.
And the AP has as well at this point.
But is that the end of it? I mean, you got to have certainly deeper questions in the newsroom, but I think even publicly there's got to be accountability here, not just a quick statement and be done with it.
And again, it's not just this one incident, but how does this affect the way that we should view the reporting from those organizations in other conflicts around the world or other outposts in which they do not have employees who are the ones gathering the information, gathering the facts, gathering the pictures, but freelancers or people who are not directly connected? How well do they vet them? How well do they know them? How well are they capturing the facts on the ground as opposed to giving a one-sided account or, taking part in whatever horrendous action is taking place?
And if they're, and we've talked about this before too, if they're having this moral wrestling match with using the word terrorism, you can bet that they're probably not exercising the greatest scrutiny with what they're dealing with in Gaza and beyond. It's not just there. I mean, they take sides in a lot of different areas, foreign and domestic. And so once again, the media not covering itself in glory.
Hey, y'all, this is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. We all have a heartfelt reason to support our blood pressure. In fact, more than half the U.S. population would benefit from blood pressure support. Superbeets Heart Chews are an easy and convenient way to support healthy blood pressure and promote heart-healthy energy. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Superbeets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. And believe me, I know, because I'm traveling all over the country covering stories and frankly, sometimes all over the world. And it's so easy. I just keep my Superbeets in my handbag, in my pocket, wherever. And I've got amazing energy. And guess what? They taste really good. So supporting healthy blood pressure comes with a bonus. Superbeets Heart Chews support healthy circulation. So you not only get blood pressure support, you also get a productive, heart-healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Superbeet Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Superbeet Heart Chews and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using promo code Sarah. That's S-A-R-A. GetSuperBeets.com, code Sarah to get 15% off your first order. GetSuperbeets.com, promo code Sarah.
All right, on to our crazy martini now, and hats off to you, Scott, for flagging this one since this is happening in your backyard in my original home state of Michigan. Of course, Democrats control everything in Lansing, governorship, and the 2 chambers of the legislature, sadly, as we're in the second term now of Gretchen Whitmer. And that means they are pursuing as much as they can on this radical agenda. And when it comes to green energy, specifically the renewables of solar and wind power, they want a lot more land. Michigan could need 209,000 more acres set aside for solar and wind power. And as you point out, that's 326 square miles of just solar panels and windmills. And that's not even all they would need to get to their goal of 100% renewable energy by 2040, which is just 17 years away. And given what we know about the capacity of renewables, is pretty laughable on the surface. So what's the reaction where you are? And I mean, is this guaranteed to happen, or is there still a big fight here?
It is essentially guaranteed to happen. Those bills will make their way to the governor's desk, and Governor Gretchen Whitmer will sign them. This is, you have to see the full picture developing here, Greg, because there are 2 things happening in tandem here in Michigan, and I would say people should be on alert for them. wherever they might be, especially in blue states or states currently controlled by a all-blue government, as we are here in Michigan. But there were two things happening simultaneously here. One is this the push, as you outlined, for complete green energy usage. You know, the first question I get from people when I talk about this is one that I guess I didn't think about initially, but it makes sense. They say, well, what about gas-powered cars? My response is, gasoline is not distributed through government-controlled means, right? Electricity is and natural gas is, but gasoline is not. So that's why it's not covered under some of this stuff. But these green energy bills, again, 60% by a certain date, 100% by 2040. And that means that you need an incredible amount of green energy in a very short period of time. So on a parallel track with the bills that create those green energy mandates for the state, is a separate bill that deals with the approval process for green energy projects. So we all have driven by these massive solar farms on the side of the road. We all have now driven by these massive wind turbine farms on the side of the road and side of the highways. And so what Michigan is doing in the future is saying that local control of those projects doesn't exist anymore. If someone wants to put a solar farm in your backyard, so to speak, if someone wants to build a giant wind farm next door, your local government, your local municipality can say no. However, if they do say no, that decision now goes to Lansing. And a new government body or an existing government body there has the final say about whether that project goes through. So it's like Henry Ford used to say, you can have your Model T in any color as long as the color is black. You can say no to that big green energy project, but the answer is actually still going to be yes. And they've done this in tandem for obvious reasons, because now they say, well, I know, little community in Michigan, that you don't really want this solar farm in your backyard, but what are we supposed to do? We have a mandate, a law that says we have to get to 100% clean green energy by 2040. And so we have to have it somewhere. So we've got to put it there. We've got to put it somewhere. So it's this loop that now occurs. Why do you need to do it? Because the law is there. Why is the law there? Well, because we want to do it this way, right? And that's how it's going to work in the future in Michigan. Lansing will have control over these solar and wind projects across the state because they've got to hit these mandates in the law that they themselves passed to hit 100% by 2040. And again, the amount of land needed, you ran down the numbers, but that's, by the time you get to 2040 and 100%, that's essentially the size of an entire, standard size county in Michigan, with every inch of land in that county being covered by solar panels or wind turbines. And certainly, they're not going to happen in major cities like Grand Rapids and Detroit. So you push them out into smaller communities like, here in Hillsdale or elsewhere toward the northern part of the state, the Upper Peninsula, and local officials there, local municipalities now will no longer have control about what ends up in their communities.
And how convenient for Gretchen Whitmer that those areas didn't vote for her, so she really doesn't care, I don't think, how opposed they are, if that's what she wants to push forward. Scott, how's this going to work? Because we've got, the EV mandates for new cars coming in California, and so many states follow California's lead. Joe Biden's doing the same in a administrative state type of way. But we know that they can't meet the capacity. We know that. They're going to fail. So the question is, do they kick the deadline down the road and make some sort of excuse that they're making progress, so therefore, we don't have to have it done by this date? Or do they just make us all suffer and stick to the deadline?
They'll kick it. I think that's happened in a few places. Perhaps even Illinois has blown past some early mandate that they have set, and they begin pushing the year back. And so I think that's more likely is a 5-year extension, a 3-year extension to hit some sort of self-imposed mandate for using green energy, clean energy. The other question that comes up, and it's one my students asked as we talked about this story, is, what qualifies as green energy, clean energy? There was a big push in Michigan to actually exempt natural gas burning natural gas from the clean energy mandates. As of now, I think it's still in that bill. But, nuclear power is thought of in many different ways by those on the left and in the environmental movement. And I would imagine in some states that write similar laws to this, they'll carve out nuclear power and say, nope, that doesn't count. It's got to be just solar, wind, or biomass or geothermal or something along those lines. And if we get to a point in which, around the corner, you can see it's not going to happen by a specific date, I think they just kick the can down the road a couple of years. I think that's the most likely scenario.
Yeah, nuclear is the biggest tell on that one. I mean, don't build them on a fault line. We know that, right? But you've got Fukushima and Chernobyl, of course, which were significant problems. But I think one is due to not being up to our standards, shall we say. And the other one, of course, was due to a tsunami. And so if you just build these in places where those things are highly unlikely to happen, you're probably not going to run into many issues. But due to the environmental movement over the last 45 years, ever since the China syndrome and Jane Fonda and all this stuff about nuclear power.
Yep.
All we've done is kick ourselves on our own shins in terms of energy independence. This could solve a whole lot of problems and nobody'd have to suffer at all.
Now, even if they do kick the can by a couple of years, it doesn't mean the costs will be contained, right? The costs to ramp up to this are going to be significant and substantial, and that is going to be passed down to the consumers. Even if you do kick that law, 5 years into the future and say it's 2045 or 2050, depending what state you're in, the speed with which this change needs to happen to come close to hitting those mandates necessitates an incredible amount of, investment or spending, as we would call it. And that, of course, gets passed down to the consumer. So costs will rise everywhere.
Such a canard. It's such a total canard. Scott, so frustrating. I do miss Michigan, but I don't miss that happening. Although, the way things are going in Virginia, we might be all Democratic government here in a couple of years too again. So hopefully not, but frustrating to watch, just states and federal officials making life much, much more expensive and much more difficult for the American people when it's completely unnecessary. So
yes, but at least they're doing something, right?
That has gotten us into more trouble than just about any approach ever, other than, don't let a crisis go to waste, that sort of thing. So, Scott, always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for your insights, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
Scott Bertram of Hillsdale College. He is the director of the college's podcast network, host of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, general manager of 101.7 FM, Radio Free Hillsdale, on the campus of Hillsdale College, where he also lectures in journalism. And don't forget about his fantastic new podcast, Wasn't That Special? 50 Years of Saturday Night Live, found at wasn'tthatspecial.com. Don't forget to subscribe there. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Remember to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell some friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us all on X. Scott is at Scott Bertram. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.